Are you experiencing this problem with your FiTech system on a new installation where you crank the engine and it fires but it won't start? Or if you prime the engine a few times, get some fuel in there and it fires and starts? Well, today on Tech Tuesday at FiTech, we're going to cover how to diagnose and solve that problem.
There are 7 key areas that can cause difficult starting. Maybe it fires and dies, or maybe it won't start at all. Number 1 is key wires on accessory. Number 2 is the incorrect RPM input setting. Number 3, the battery or ECU supply voltage is low when cranking. Number 4, the fuel pressure is low or you're out of fuel. Number 5, the IAC or idle screw adjustment is out of adjustment. Number 6, the crank fuel is too much or too little. And number 7, the after start fuel is not correctly set. The first and most common problem for new installations and difficult starting is the key wires on the accessory position of the ignition switch. What happens is the key voltage drops to 0 during cranking, and this causes the RPMs to actually read 0 because the computer thinks the system has been turned off and is not supposed to eject fuel. The way to notice it on the system is the RPM stays 0 while you're cranking, but maybe if you let off the key it may show a few RPMs, but typically it just stays 0. The way to fix this is to relocate the position for the ignition switch input on our system. Make sure you find a position on the key switch that is hot during cranking. A very common position is the ignition wire that feeds your ignition system. So if you're getting spark but no fuel during cranking, find the wire that's either feeding the CDI or feeding the distributor. That wire is hot during cranking. If you're on a new installation and you can't get the engine to start, it may actually have the RPM input on the wrong setting. In the initial setup, engine setup, the tach or 2-wire setting is very important. If you're on tach input, such as on a street system, or you're just reading the tach input from the negative of a coil or the CDI output, this setting needs to be set to tach. If you do change the setting, you do need to turn the key off, let the system save the setting so that it powers up with the right settings and can read that tach input. If you're doing ignition timing control, it needs to be on the VR coil. Same situation, send it to the computer, turn the key off, let it save. Another very common problem for difficult starting is the battery is too low or the battery connection is in the wrong position on the system. The battery connection should be connected directly to the battery. The starter will draw a lot of current when it's cranking, and if the battery voltage gets below 9 volts, the engine almost cannot start because the injectors cannot open. One way to diagnose this is crank, look at battery on this system, on the handheld in the dashboard. If it's going to 9 volts, you may need to reevaluate where you've connected the battery wire input. As you can see on this system, when I start the engine, the battery voltage does drop into the 10 volt range. That's acceptable. If it's dropping below 10, you may want to make sure your battery is charged fully. If you're parking your car for a long time, definitely keep it on a tender. Keep that battery fully charged to ensure easy starting. If you're parking your car at a car show, make sure you're not draining the battery with speakers or fans or just leaving the door open a lot. Another common problem for difficult starting is low fuel pressure or you're actually out of fuel. Easy way is add fuel, but also check to make sure you set up your fuel system correctly. Make sure if you're a brand new install that you actually have a fuel pressure regulator in the system. Throttle bodies come with a fuel pressure regulator, but it does need a return line. Force fuels have a regulator built in. Ultra Rams and LS systems actually need an external pressure regulator. Maybe if you're using a force fuel, it's okay, but if you're using a fuel pump in the tank, you will need a pressure regulator somewhere in the line, whether it's a Corvette pressure regulator filter or an external pressure regulator mounted in the engine bay. If your engine has been running fine but has suddenly developed running issues or starting issues, your fuel filter may be clogged. You can see this with a fuel pressure gauge mounted after the fuel filter. A block filter can usually be serviced or replaced. Sometimes the fuel pressure regulator may actually be clogged and building up way too high a pressure. This can also be diagnosed with the fuel pressure gauge. Most of our fuel pressure regulators can be serviced by just removing them and cleaning the little screen on them.